Hi, everyone, and welcome to this celebration of the holidays with Ella Montgomery. I'm Andrea Mackenzie. I'm located in Toronto, and along with Benjamin Lefebvre, I am delighted to bring you this, what we hope is going to be an inaugural event with more to follow. Today, we have the pleasure of listening to four readers. Todd Pettigrew and Jane Sandell will be reading Matthew Insists on Puffed Sleeves from Anne of Green Gables. They will be followed by Allison Dean, who happens to be my sister, who will be reading about Catherine Brooks' Enchanted Christmas when she arrives at Green Gables. As you listen to this chapter, remember the context. Catherine has reluctantly come to Green Gables. The evening before, she had confessed her previous life to Anne, and they are now about to celebrate Christmas Day and Christmas week. Allison is reading from the East Riding of Yorkshire in the UK. And our final reader is Benjamin Lefebvre himself. Ben is reading a selection of pieces that he personally curated. Ben is reading from Kitchener, Ontario, and of course, he really doesn't need an introduction because we all know him. Confession time. The reason I'm introducing people now is because when we recorded the session, I, of course, forgot to press record until after the introductions were done. So we did manage to save most of the recorded chapters. However, Ben's words of welcome to you at the beginning are missing, as are Todd's and Jane's introductions of themselves. So I apologize for that, but I hope those of you who are watching this recording enjoy it regardless. A good time to come. So without further ado, we will turn to our first reading by Todd and Jane. Matthew Insists on Puffed Sleeves from Anne of Green Gables. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, I'm Todd Pettigrew from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, and today I'm reading chapter 25 of Anne of Green Gables in the Sterling Classics edition. Chapter 25, Matthew Insists on Puffed Sleeves. Matthew was having a bad 10 minutes of it. He had come into the kitchen in the twilight of a cold, gray December evening, and had sat down in the woodbox corner to take off his heavy boots, unconscious of the fact that Anne and a bevy of her schoolmates were having a practice of the Fairy Queen in the sitting room. Presently they came trooping through the hall and out into the kitchen, laughing and chattering gaily. They did not see Matthew, who shrank bashfully back into the shadows beyond the woodbox, with a boot in one hand and a boot jack in the other, and he watched them shyly for the aforesaid 10 minutes as they put on caps and jackets and talked about the dialogue and the concert. Anne stood among them, bright-eyed and animated as they, but Matthew suddenly became conscious that there was something about her different from her mates. And what worried Matthew was that the difference impressed him as being something that should not exist. Anne had a brighter face and bigger, starrier eyes, and more delicate features than the others. Even shy, unobservant Matthew had learned to take note of these things. But the difference that disturbed him did not consist in any of these respects. Then, in what did it consist? Matthew was haunted by this question long after the girls had gone, arm in arm, down the long, hard-frozen lane, and Anne had betaken herself to her books. He could not refer it to Marilla, who he felt would be quite sure to sniff scornfully and remark that the only difference she saw between Anne and the other girls was that they sometimes kept their tongues quiet, while Anne never did. This, Matthew felt, would be no great help. He had recourse to his pipe that evening to help him study it out, much to Marilla's disgust. After 2 hours of smoking and hard reflection, Matthew arrived at a solution of his problem. Anne was not dressed like the other girls. The more Matthew thought about the matter, the more he was convinced that Anne never had been dressed like the other girls, never since she had come to Green Gables. Marilla kept her clothed in plain dark dresses, all made after the same unvarying pattern. If Matthew knew there was such a thing as fashion in dress, it is as much as he did. But he was quite sure that Anne's sleeves did not look at all like the sleeves the other girls wore. He recalled the cluster of little girls he had seen around her that evening, all gay in waists of red and blue and pink and white, and he wondered why Marilla always kept her so plainly and soberly gowned. Of course, it must be all right. Marilla knew best, and Marilla was bringing her up. Probably some wise, inscrutable motive was to be served thereby. But surely it would do no harm to let the child have one pretty dress, something like Diana Barry always wore. Matthew decided that he would give her one. That surely could not be objected to as an unwarranted putting in of his oar. Christmas was only a fortnight off. A nice new dress would be the very thing for a present. Matthew, with a sigh of satisfaction, put away his pipe and went to bed, while Marilla opened all the doors and aired the house. The very next evening, Matthew betook himself to Carmody to buy the dress, determined to get the worst over and have done with it. It would be, he felt assured, no trifling ordeal. There were some things Matthew could buy and prove himself no mean bargainer, but he knew he would be at the mercy of shopkeepers when it came to buying a girl's dress. After much cogitation, Matthew resolved to go to Samuel Lawson's store instead of William Blair's. To be sure, the Cuthberts always had gone to William Blair's. It was almost as much a matter of conscience with them as to attend the Presbyterian church and vote Conservative. But William Blair's 2 daughters frequently waited on customers there, and Matthew held them in absolute dread. He could contrive to deal with them when he knew exactly what he wanted and could point it out, but in such a matter as this, requiring explanation and consultation, Matthew felt that he must be sure of a man behind the counter. So he would go to Lawson's, where Samuel or his son would wait on him. Alas, Matthew did not know that Samuel, in the recent expansion of his business, had set up a lady clerk also. She was a niece of his wife's, and a very dashing young person indeed, with a huge drooping pompadour, big rolling brown eyes, and a most extensive and bewildering smile. She was dressed with exceeding smartness and wore several bangle bracelets that glittered and rattled and tinkled with every movement of her hands. Matthew was covered with confusion at finding her there at all, and those bangles completely wrecked his wits at one fell swoop. "What can I do for you this evening, Mr. Cuthbert?" Miss Lucilla Harris inquired, briskly and ingratiatingly, tapping the counter with both hands. "Have you any garden rakes?" stammered Matthew. Miss Harris looked somewhat surprised, as well she might, to hear a man inquiring for garden rakes in the middle of December. "I believe we have 1 or 2 left over," she said, "but they're upstairs in the lumber room. I'll go and see." During her absence, Matthew collected his scattered senses for another effort. When Miss Harris returned with the rake and cheerfully inquired, "Anything else tonight, Mr. Cuthbert?" Matthew took his courage in both hands and replied, "Well, now, since you suggest it, I might as well look at, buy some hayseed." Miss Harris had heard Matthew Cuthbert called odd. She now concluded that he was entirely crazy. "We only keep hayseed in the spring," she explained loftily. "We've none on hand just now." "Oh, certainly, certainly. Just as you say," stammered unhappy Matthew, seizing the rake and making for the door. At the threshold he recollected that he had not paid for it, and he turned miserably back. While Miss Harris was counting out his change, he rallied his powers for a final desperate attempt. "Well, now, if it isn't too much trouble, I might as well. That is, I'd like to look at some sugar." "White or brown?" queried Miss Harris patiently. "Oh, well, now, brown," said Matthew feebly. "There's a barrel of it over there," said Miss Harris, shaking her bangles at it. "It's the only kind we have." I'll take 20 pounds of it," said Matthew, with beads of perspiration standing on his forehead. Matthew had driven halfway home before he was his own man again. It had been a gruesome experience, but it served him right, he thought, for committing the heresy of going to a strange store. When he reached home, he hid the rake in the tool house, but the sugar he carried in to Marilla. "Brown sugar!" exclaimed Marilla. "Whatever possessed you to get so much? You know I never use it except for the hired man's porridge or black fruit cake. Jerry's gone, and I've made my cake long ago. It's not good sugar either. It's coarse and dark. William Blair doesn't usually keep sugar like that." I thought it might come in handy sometime," said Matthew, making good his escape. When Matthew came to think the matter over, he decided that a woman was required to cope with the situation. Marilla was out of the question. Matthew felt sure she would throw cold water on his project at once. Remained only Mrs. Lynde, for of no other woman in Avonlea would Matthew have dared to ask advice. To Mrs. Lynde he went accordingly, and that good lady promptly took the matter out of the harassed man's hands. "Pick out a dress for you to give Anne? To be sure I will. I'm going to Carmody tomorrow, and I'll attend to it. Have you something particular in mind? No? Well, I'll just go by my own judgment then. I believe a nice rich brown would just suit Anne, and William Blair has some new Gloria in that's real pretty. Perhaps you'd like me to make it up for her, too, seeing that if Marilla was to make it, Anne would probably get wind of it before the time and spoil the surprise. Well, I'll do it. No, it isn't a mite of trouble. I like sewing. I'll make it to fit my niece, Jenny Gillis, for she and Anne are as like as two peas as far as figure goes." "Well, now, I'm much obliged," said Matthew, and I don't know, but I think they make the sleeves different nowadays to what they used to be. If it wouldn't be asking too much, I'd like them made in the new way." "Puffs, of course. You needn't worry a speck more about it, Matthew. I'll make it up in the very latest fashion," said Mrs. Lynde. To herself, she added when Matthew had gone, "It'll be a real satisfaction to see that poor child wearing something decent for once. The way Marilla dresses her is positively ridiculous, that's what, and I've ached to tell her so plainly a dozen times. I've held my tongue, though, for I can see Marilla doesn't want advice, and she thinks she knows more about bringing children up than I do, for all she's an old maid. But that's always the way. Folks that has brought up children know that there's no hard and fast method in the world that'll suit every child. But them as never have think it's all as plain and easy as rule of three. Just set your three terms down so fashion, and the sum'll work out correct. But flesh and blood don't come under the head of arithmetic, and that's where Marilla Cuthbert makes her mistake. I suppose she's trying to cultivate a spirit of humility in Anne by dressing her as she does, but it's more likely to cultivate envy and discontent. I'm sure the child must feel the difference between her clothes and the other girls. But to think of Matthew taking notice of it. That man is waking up after being asleep for over 60 years.
Marilla knew all the following fortnight that Matthew had something on his mind, but what it was she could not guess until Christmas Eve, when Mrs. Lynde brought up the dress. Marilla behaved pretty well on the whole, although it is very likely she distrusted Mrs. Lynde's diplomatic explanation that she had made the dress because Matthew was afraid Anne would find out about it too soon if Marilla made it. So this is what Matthew has been looking so mysterious over and grinning about to himself for 2 weeks, is it? She said a little stiffly, but tolerantly. I knew he was up to some foolishness. Well, I must say, I don't think Anne needed any more dresses. I made her 3 good, warm, serviceable ones this fall, and anything more is sheer extravagance. There's enough material in those sleeves alone to make a waist, I declare there is. You'll just pamper Anne's vanity, Matthew, and she's as vain as a peacock now. Well, I hope she'll be satisfied at last, for I know she's been hankering after those silly sleeves ever since they came in, though she never said a word after the first. The puffs have been getting bigger and more ridiculous right along. They're as big as balloons now. Next year, anybody who wears them will have to go out through a door sideways. Christmas morning broke on a beautiful white world. It had been a very mild December, and people had looked forward to a green Christmas. But just enough snow fell softly in the night to transfigure Avonlea. Anne peeped out from her frosted gable window with delighted eyes. The firs in the haunted wood were all feathery and wonderful. The birches and wild cherry trees were outlined in pearl. The ploughed fields were stretches of snowy dimples, and there was a crisp tang in the air that was glorious. Anne ran downstairs singing until her voice re-echoed through Green Gables. Merry Christmas, Marilla. Merry Christmas, Matthew. Isn't it a lovely Christmas? I'm so glad it's white. Any other kind of Christmas doesn't seem real, does it? I don't like green Christmases. They're not green. They're just nasty faded browns and greys. What makes people call them green? Why, Matthew, is that for me? Oh, Matthew. Matthew had sheepishly unfolded the dress from its paper swathings and held it out with a deprecatory glance at Marilla, who feigned to be contemptuously filling the teapot, but nevertheless watched the scene out of the corner of her eye with a rather interested air. Anne took the dress and looked at it in reverent silence. Oh, how pretty it was! A lovely soft brown gloria with all the gloss of silk, a skirt with dainty frills and shirrings, a waist elaborately pin-tucked in the most fashionable way, with a little ruffle of filmy lace at the neck. But the sleeves, they were the crowning glory. Long elbow cuffs, and above them 2 beautiful puffs, divided by rows of shirring and bows of brown silk ribbon. That's a Christmas present for you, Anne, said Matthew shyly. Why, Anne, don't you like it? Well now. For Anne's eyes had suddenly filled with tears. Like it? Oh, Matthew! Anne laid the dress over a chair and clasped her hands. Matthew, it's perfectly exquisite. Oh, I can never thank you enough. Look at those sleeves. Oh, it seems to me this must be a happy dream. Well, let us have breakfast, interrupted Marilla. I must say, Anne, I don't think you needed the dress, but since Matthew has got it for you, see you take good care of it. There's a hair ribbon Mrs. Lynde left for you. It's brown to match the dress. Come now, sit in. I don't see how I'm going to eat breakfast, said Anne rapturously. Breakfast seems so commonplace at such an exciting moment. I'd rather feast my eyes on that dress. I'm so glad that puffed sleeves are still fashionable. It did seem to me that I'd never get over it if they went out before I had a dress with them. I'd never have felt quite satisfied, you see. It was lovely of Mrs. Lynde to give me the ribbon too. I feel that I ought to be a very good girl indeed. It's at times like this I'm sorry I'm not a model little girl, and I always resolve that I will be in future. But somehow it's hard to carry out your resolutions when irresistible temptations come. Still, I really will make an extra effort after this. When the commonplace breakfast was over, Diana appeared, crossing the white log bridge in the hollow, a gay little figure in her crimson ulster. Anne flew down the slope to meet her. Merry Christmas, Diana. I know it's a wonderful Christmas. I've something splendid to show you. Matthew has given me the loveliest dress with such sleeves. I couldn't even imagine any nicer. I've got something more for you, said Diana breathlessly. Here, this box. Aunt Josephine sent us out a big box with ever so many things in it, and this is for you. I'd have brought it over last night, but it didn't come until after dark, and I never feel very comfortable coming through the haunted wood in the dark now. Anne opened the box and peeped in. First a card with "For the Anne girl" and "Merry Christmas" written on it, and then a pair of the daintiest little kid slippers with beaded toes and satin bows and glistening buckles. "Oh," said Anne, "Diana, this is too much. I must be dreaming." "I call it providential," said Diana. "You won't have to borrow Ruby's slippers now, and that's a blessing, for they're 2 sizes too big for you, and it would be awful to hear a fairy shuffling. Josie Pye would be delighted. Mind you, Rob Wright went home with Gertie Pye from the practice night before last. Did you ever hear anything equal to that?" All the Avonlea scholars were in a fever of excitement that day, for the hall had to be decorated and a last grand rehearsal held. The concert came off in the evening and was a pronounced success. The little hall was crowded. All the performers did excellently well, but Anne was the bright particular star of the occasion, as even envy, in the shape of Josie Pye, dared not deny. "Oh, hasn't it been a brilliant evening?" sighed Anne when it was all over and she and Diana were walking home together under a dark, starry sky. "Everything went off very well," said Diana practically. "I guess we must have made as much as $10. Mind you, Mr. Allen is going to send an account of it to the Charlottetown papers." "Oh, Diana, will we really see our names in print? It makes me thrill to think of it. Your solo was perfectly elegant, Diana. I felt prouder than you did when it was encored. I just said to myself, it is my dear bosom friend who is so honoured." "Well, your recitations just brought the house down, Anne. That sad one was simply splendid." "Oh, I was so nervous, Diana. When Mr. Allen called out my name, I really cannot tell how I ever got up on that platform. I felt as if a million eyes were looking at me and through me, and for one dreadful moment I was sure I couldn't begin at all. Then I thought of my lovely puffed sleeves and took courage. I knew that I must live up to those sleeves, Diana. So I started in, and my voice seemed to be coming from ever so far away. I just felt like a parrot. It's providential that I practiced those recitations so often up in the garret, or I'd never have been able to get through. Did I groan all right?" "Yes, indeed, you groaned lovely," assured Diana. "I saw old Mrs. Sloane wiping away tears when I sat down. It was splendid to think I had touched somebody's heart. It's so romantic to take part in a concert, isn't it? Oh, it's been a very memorable occasion indeed." "Wasn't the boys' dialogue fine?" said Diana. "Gilbert Blythe was just splendid. And I do think it's awful mean the way you treat Gil. Wait till I tell you. When you ran off the platform after the fairy dialogue, one of your roses fell out of your hair. I saw Gil pick it up and put it in his breast pocket. There now, you're so romantic, I'm sure you ought to be pleased at that." "It's nothing to me what that person does," said Anne loftily. "I simply never waste a thought on him, Diana." That night, Marilla and Matthew, who had been out to a concert for the first time in 20 years, sat for a while by the kitchen fire after Anne had gone to bed. "Well now, I guess our Anne did as well as any of them," said Matthew proudly. "Yes, she did," admitted Marilla. "She's a bright child, Matthew. And she looked real nice too. I've been kind of opposed to this concert scheme, but I suppose there's no real harm in it after all. Anyhow, I was proud of Anne tonight, although I'm not going to tell her so." "Well now, I was proud of her, and I did tell her so, before she went upstairs," said Matthew. "We must see what we can do for her some of these days, Marilla. I guess she'll need something more than Avonlea School by and by." "There's enough time to think of that," said Marilla. "She's only 13 in March. Though tonight it struck me she was growing quite a big girl. Mrs. Lynde made that dress a mite too long, and it makes Anne look so tall. She's quick to learn, and I guess the best thing we can do for her will be to send her to Queen's after a spell. But nothing need be said about that for a year or two yet." "Well now, it'll do no harm to be thinking it over off and on," said Matthew. "Things like that are all the better for lots of thinking over."
Thank you so much, Todd and Jane. That was wonderful. Next up, we have a close relative of mine, my sister, Allison Dean.
Good afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you may be. I'm situated just outside of Hull in the East Riding of Yorkshire, and the bears are with me. No reading would be complete without the bears, and Padre Neil is our religious tonight. I'm going to be reading from the British edition, Anne of Windy Willows. I don't know if you can see that. It's a 1936 edition. It's not the very first printing, it's the second. So here we go. It is the second year, chapter 6. Saturday and Monday were full of gay doings at Green Gables. The plum pudding was concocted, and the Christmas tree brought home. Catherine and Anne and Davy and Dora went to the woods for it. A beautiful little fir to whose cutting down Anne was only reconciled by the fact that it was in a little clearing of Mr. Harrison's, which was going to be stumped and ploughed in the spring anyhow. They wandered about, gathering creeping spruce and ground pine for wreaths, even some ferns that kept green in a certain deep hollow of the woods all the winter, until day smiled back at night over white-bosomed hills, and they came back to Green Gables in triumph, to meet a tall, young man with hazel eyes and the beginnings of a mustache, which made him look so much older and maturer that Anne had one awful moment of wondering if it really was Gilbert or a stranger. Catherine, with a little smile that tried to be sarcastic but couldn't quite succeed, left them in the parlor and played games with the twins in the kitchen all the evening. To her amazement, she found she was enjoying it. And what fun it was to go down the cellar with Davy and find that there were really such things as sweet apples still left in the world. Catherine had never been in a country cellar before and had no idea what a delightful, spooky, shadowy place it could be by candlelight. Life already seemed warmer. For the first time, it came home to Catherine that life might be beautiful, even for her. Davy made enough noise to wake the 7 sleepers at an unearthly hour Christmas morning, ringing an old cowbell up and down the stairs. Marilla was horrified at his doing such a thing when there was a guest in the house. But Catherine came down laughing. Somehow, an odd camaraderie had sprung up between her and Davy. She told Anne candidly that she had no use for the impeccable Dora, but that Davy was somehow tarred with her own brush. They opened the parlor and distributed the gifts before breakfast, because the twins, even Dora, couldn't have eaten anything if they hadn't. Catherine, who had not expected anything except, perhaps, a duty gift from Anne, found herself getting presents from everyone. A gay crocheted afghan from Mrs. Lynde, a sachet of orris root from Dora, a paper knife from Davy, a basket full of tiny jars of jam and jelly from Marilla, even a little bronze Chessy cat for a paperweight from Gilbert. And tied under the tree, curled up on a bit of warm and woolly blanket, a dear little brown-eyed puppy with alert silken ears and an ingratiating tail. A card tied to his neck bore the legend, "From Anne, who dares, after all, to wish you a Merry Christmas." Catherine gathered his wriggling little body up in her arms and spoke shakily. "Oh, Anne, he's a darling, but Mrs. Dennis won't let me keep him. I asked her if I might get a dog, and she refused." "I've arranged it all with Mrs. Dennis. You'll find she won't object. And anyway, Catherine, you're not going to be there long. You must find a decent place to live now that you've paid off what you thought were your obligations. Look at the lovely box of stationery Diana sent me. Isn't it fascinating to look at the blank pages and wonder what will be written on them?" Mrs. Lynde was thankful it was a white Christmas. There would be no fat graveyards when Christmas was white. But to Catherine, it seemed a purple and crimson and golden Christmas. And the week that followed was just as beautiful. Catherine had often wondered bitterly just what it would be like to be happy. And now she found out. She bloomed out in the most astonishing way. Anne found herself enjoying their companionship. "To think I was afraid she would spoil my Christmas holiday," she reflected in amazement. "To think," said Catherine to herself, "that I was on the verge of refusing to come here when Anne invited me." They went for long walks through Lover's Lane and the haunted wood, where the very silence seemed friendly. Over hills where the light snow whirled in a winter dance of goblins. Through old orchards full of violet shadows. Through the glory of sunset woods. There were no birds to chirp or sing, no brooks to gurgle, no squirrels to gossip. But the wind made occasional music that had in quality what it lacked in quantity. "One can always find something to look at or listen to," said Anne. They talked of cabbages and kings, and hitched their wagons to stars, and came home with appetites that taxed even the Green Gables pantry. One day it stormed and they couldn't go out. The east wind was beating round the eaves, and the grey gulf was roaring. But even a storm at Green Gables had charms of its own. It was cozy to sit by the stove and dreamily watch the firelight flickering over the ceiling while you munched apples and candy. How jolly supper was with the storm wailing outside. One night, Gilbert took them to see Diana and her new baby daughter. "I never held a baby in my life before," said Catherine as they drove home. "For one thing, I didn't want to. And for another, I'd have been afraid of it going to pieces in my grasp. You can't imagine how I felt. So big and clumsy, with that tiny, exquisite thing in my arms. I know Mrs. Wright thought I was going to drop it every minute. I could see her striving heroically to conceal her terror. But it did something to me. The baby, I mean. I haven't decided just what." "Babies are such fascinating creatures," said Anne dreamily. "They're what I heard somebody at Redmond call terrific bundles of potentialities. Think of it, Catherine. Homer must have been a baby once, a baby with dimples and great eyes full of light. He couldn't have been blind then, of course. What a pity his mother didn't know he was to be Homer," said Catherine. "But I think I'm glad Judas's mother didn't know he was to be Judas," said Anne softly. "I hope she never did know." There was a concert in the hall one night, with a party at Abner Sloane's after it, and Anne persuaded Catherine to go to both. I want you to give us a reading for our program, Catherine. I've heard you read beautifully. I used to recite. I think I rather liked doing it. But the summer before last, I recited at a shore concert, which a party of summer resorters got up, and I heard them laughing at me afterwards. How do you know they were laughing at you? They must have been. There wasn't anything else to laugh at. Anne hid a smile and persisted in asking for the reading. Give Ginevra for an encore. I'm told you do that splendidly. Mrs. Stephen Pringle told me she never slept a wink the night after she heard you give it. No, I've never liked Ginevra. It's in the reader, so I try occasionally to show the class how to read it. I really have no patience with Ginevra. Why didn't she scream when she found herself locked in? When they were hunting everywhere for her, surely somebody would have heard her. Catherine finally promised the reading, but was dubious about the party. I'll go, of course, but nobody will ask me to dance, and I'll feel sarcastic and prejudiced and ashamed. I'm always miserable at parties, the few I've ever gone to. Nobody seems to think I can dance, and you know I can fairly well, Anne. I picked it up at Uncle Henry's, because a poor bit of a maid they had wanted to learn too, and she and I used to dance together in the kitchen at night to the music that went on in the parlor. I think I'd like it, with the right kind of partner. You won't be miserable at this party, Catherine. You won't be outside looking in. There's all the difference in the world, you know, between being inside looking out and outside looking in. You have such lovely hair, Catherine. Do you mind if I try a new way of doing it? Catherine shrugged. Oh, go ahead. I suppose my hair does look dreadful, but I've no time to be always crimping. I haven't a party dress. Will my green taffeta do? It will have to do, though green is the one color above all others you should never wear, my dear Catherine. But you're going to wear a red pin-tucked chiffon collar I've made for you. Yes, you are. You ought to have a red dress, Catherine. I've always hated red. When I went to live at Uncle Henry's, Aunt Gertrude always made me wear aprons of bright turkey red. The other children in school used to call out, "Fire!" when I came in with one of those aprons on. Anyway, I can't be bothered with clothes. Heaven grant me patience. Clothes are very important, said Anne severely, as she braided and coiled. Then she looked at her work and saw that it was good. She put her arm about Catherine's shoulders and turned her to the mirror. Don't you truly think we're a pair of good-looking girls? She laughed. And isn't it really nice to think people will find some pleasure in looking at us? There are so many homely people who would actually look quite attractive if they took a little pain with themselves. 3 Sundays ago in church, you remember, the day poor old Mr. Milvain preached and had such a terrible cold in his head that nobody could make out what he was saying. Well, I passed the time making the people around me beautiful. I gave Mrs. Brent a new nose. I waved Mary Addison's hair and gave Jane Marsden's a lemon rinse. I dressed Emma Dill in blue instead of brown. I dressed Charlotte Blair in stripes instead of checks. I removed several moles, and I shaved off Thomas Anderson's long, sandy Piccadilly weepers. You wouldn't have known them when I got through with them. And, except perhaps for Mrs. Brent's nose, they could have done everything I did themselves. Why, Catherine, your eyes are just the color of tea. Amber tea. Now, live up to your name this evening. A brook should be sparkling, limpid, merry. Everything I'm not. Everything you've been this past week. So you can be it. That's only the magic of Green Gables. When I go back to Summerside, 12 o'clock will have struck for Cinderella. You'll take the magic back with you. Look at yourself, looking for once as you ought to look all the time. Catherine gazed at her reflection in the mirror, as if rather doubting her identity. I do look years younger, she admitted. You were right. Clothes do things to you. Oh, I know I've been looking older than my age. I didn't care. Why should I? Nobody else cared. And I'm not like you, Anne. Apparently, you were born knowing how to live, and I don't know anything about it, not even the ABC. I wonder if it's too late to learn. I've been sarcastic so long, I don't know if I can be anything else. Sarcasm seemed to me to be the only way I could make any impression on people. And it seems to me, too, that I've always been afraid when I was in the company of other people. Afraid of saying something stupid. Afraid of being laughed at. Catherine Brooke, look at yourself in that mirror. Carry that picture with you. Magnificent hair framing your face instead of trying to pull it backward. Eyes sparkling like stars. A little flush of excitement on your cheeks. And you won't be afraid. Come now, we're going to be late, but fortunately, all the performers have what I heard Dora referring to as preserved seats. Gilbert drove them to the hall. How like old times it was. Only Catherine was with her in place of Diana. Anne sighed. Diana had so many other interests now. No more running round to concerts and parties for her. But what an evening it was. What silvery satin roads with a pale green sky in the west after a light snowfall. Orion was treading his stately march across the heavens, and hills and fields and woods lay around them in a pearly silence. Catherine's reading captured her audience from the first line, and at the party, she could not find dances for all her would-be partners. She suddenly found herself laughing without bitterness. Then home to Green Gables, warming their toes at the sitting room fire by the light of 2 friendly candles on the mantelpiece. And Mrs. Lynde tiptoeing into their room, late as it was, to ask them if they'd like another blanket, and to assure Catherine that her little dog was snug and warm in a basket behind the kitchen stove. I've got a new outlook on life, thought Catherine as she drifted off to slumber. I didn't know there were people like this. Come again, said Marilla when she left. Marilla never said that to anyone unless she meant it. Of course she's coming again, said Anne. For weekends and for weeks in the summer. We'll build bonfires and hoe in the garden and pick apples and go for the cows and row on the pond and get lost in the woods. I want to show you little Hester Gray's garden, Catherine, and Echo Lodge and Violet Vale when it's full of violets.
Thank you so much, Allison, for that wonderful reading of Catherine's new outlook on life.
Welcome.
This has been wonderful so far. First Todd and Jane, and then Allison. Our next reader is known to you all, I assume. Ben Lefebvre will be reading next. It is his own choice of materials, and he will introduce himself, though I don't think he needs an introduction. Ben, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. Yeah, so I've been a Montgomery researcher for like probably a quarter of a century at this point. And among my projects, I am collecting the entirety of Montgomery's shorter works, which includes hundreds of poems and short stories, as well as miscellaneous pieces, the most recent of which came out a few weeks ago, Schooled with Briars, Collected Serials 1903 to 1913, contains six multi-chapter fiction serials that Montgomery published, three of them around the time that Anne of Green Gables appeared. There isn't anything in that collection that is particularly Christmassy, so I'm going to read from an essay by Montgomery called The Woods in Winter, which I collected in the Ella Montgomery Reader, Volume 1, about a decade ago, or 12 years ago now. And then I'm going to read from her Montgomery's Around the Table newspaper column that appeared in two Halifax newspapers in 1901 and 1902, and which is collected in A Name for Herself. And if we have time, I also have some poems that have not been collected yet. So some of these items, these shorter works, may contain phrases that you find familiar if you know her book-length works well. So this is the first is excerpts from an essay that she published in 1911, the year that she moved from Prince Edward Island to Ontario, entitled The Woods in Winter. Last night it snowed. I had been waiting for this first snowfall before I went again to the woods. I did not wish to spy upon their nakedness. It seems like taking an unfair advantage of old friends to visit them when they are unclad, with all the little ins and outs of their realm laid pitifully bare. There is always a November space after the leaves have fallen, when it seems almost indecent to intrude on the forest, for its glory terrestrial has departed, and its glory celestial, of spirit and purity and whiteness, has not yet come upon it. But last night the snow came, enough to transfigure and beautify, but not enough to spoil the walking. And it did not drift, but just fell softly and lightly, doing its wonder work in the murk of a December night. This morning, when I awakened and saw the world in the sunlight, I had a vision of woodland solitudes of snow, arcades picked out in pearl and silver, long floors of untrodden marble, whence spring the cathedral columns of the pines. And this afternoon I went to find the reality of my vision in the woods that belt the gray hillside. I, an overflow beyond it into many a valley white folded in immortal peace. One can really get better acquainted with the trees in winter. There is no drapery of leaves to hide them from us. We can see all their beauty of graceful limb, of upreaching boughs, of mesh-like twigs spun against the transparent skies. The slenderness or straightness or sturdiness of their trunks is revealed. Even the birds' nests are hung plainly in sight for any curious eye to see. It does not matter now. The dappled eggs have long ago hatched out into incarnate melody and grace, and the birdlings have flown to lands of the sun far distant, caring nothing now for their old cradles, which are filled with winter snows. The beeches and maples are dignified matrons, even when stripped of their foliage. And the birches, look you at that row of them against the spruce hill, their white limbs gleaming through the fine purple mist of their twigs, are beautiful pagan maidens who have never lost the Eden secret of being naked and unashamed. Up comes the moon. Saw you ever such beauty as moonlight in winter woods, such wondrous union of clear radiance with blackest gloom, such hints and hidings and revealings, such deep copses laced with silver, such aisles patterned with shadow, such valleys brimmed over with splendor? I seem to be walking through a spell-bound world of diamond and crystal and pearl. I feel a wonderful lightness of spirit and a soul-stirring joy in mere existence, a joy that seems to spring fountain-like from the very deeps of my being and to be independent of all earthly things. I am alone and I am glad of it. Any human companionship, even the dearest and most perfect, would be alien and superfluous to me now. I am sufficient unto myself, needing not any emotion of earth to round out my felicity. Such moments come rarely, but when they do come, they are inexpressibly marvelous and beautiful, as if the finite were for a second infinity, as if humanity were for a space uplifted into divinity. Only for a moment, 'tis true, yet such a moment is worth a cycle of common years untouched by the glory and the dream. So that was from The Woods in Winter, published in 1911. Now we're going to go back a decade in time to 1901. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this aspect of her work, Montgomery published a weekly column while she was working as an editor and proofreader, and as she quoted, general handyman for the Halifax Daily Echo. And so this column is signed Cynthia, and Cynthia is a woman of uncertain age who lives in a boarding house with Theodosia, Polly, Ted, and sometimes Aunt Janet. And they have various adventures. And so there were 35 installments. And even though this is fiction, it wasn't really it's fiction in the sense that Cynthia and all these other characters never existed. But it wasn't presented as fiction. It was, in fact, I was not able to find anything outside of the text that kind of gave a sense of what the text was supposed to be, or how it was meant to be viewed or understood by readers. By the way, Allison is asking, The Woods in Winter was used in Emily Wright. So these 4 essays by Montgomery, so Spring in the Woods, The Woods in Summer, The Woods in Autumn, and The Woods in Winter. Don't ask me why the first one wasn't published as The Woods in Spring, but it was published as Spring in the Woods. Those excerpts were used all over the place in virtually every book that Montgomery published in Ontario. Most of them were set in Prince Edward Island. So I talk about this in a book that's coming out in February that's on Montgomery's writing life that's called The Glory and the Dream. But basically, I see this as Montgomery's record of her, like basically her text that she drew on as a way of recapturing authentically the PEI landscape, even when she was writing about Ontario. So this installment of Around the Table from 1901, I called it Illusions of Christmas. And so once again, you'll notice things that are fairly familiar if you know Montgomery's books well. This is dated December 23rd, 1901. I believe we are going to have a white Christmas after all. I'm so glad. I hate a green Christmas. You know, when a Christmas is a dirty, grayy, browny affair, looking as if it had been left over about 100 years ago and had been in soak ever since it is called a green Christmas. Don't ask me why. As Lord Drundeary says, there are some things no fellow can understand. We don't get a white Christmas oftener than once in a blue moon, so it is something to be duly thankful for. It is the only real, guaranteed Christmas. Any other kind is a fraud and imitation. Always ask your dealer for a white Christmas and insist on having it. Lots of snow, making the world look like a magnified Christmas card, crisp, exhilarating air, and jingles of sleigh bells everywhere. That's as it should be. No green Christmas for me, an it please ye. I hear that Santa Claus is coming around on an automobile this year. The 20th century is certainly going to do away with all the little romance that is yet left us. There was a subtle charm about a benevolent, itinerant old saint roaming at large on Christmas Eve with a sleigh and bells and reindeer. When we were very, very small and deluded and happy, how we used to sit up in the bed and listen for the pawing of those reindeer's feet on the roof, wondering dreamily at the same time how they managed to get up there at all, or hang on when they did, so steep was the sloping roof of the old house. But then, of course, they were fairy reindeer, and fairy reindeer can do anything. When we heard the snow slip from the eaves, we knew they had dislodged it, and at any louder creak than usual, we knew it was Santa Claus coming down the chimney, and hoped that the fire would be quite out so that the good old soul wouldn't burn himself or get singed. In the morning, we used to go out and look for the prints of the reindeer's feet in the snow. We never found them, alas. Once we thought we did, but a scoffing older brother, who was 9 and a cynic, said they were only sheep tracks. I suppose they were. But now, Santa Claus comes on the automobile. My belief in Santa Claus was the first illusion to be stripped away from me. The process has been going on ever since, and is always painful, but not nearly as much so as it was that first time. We get hardened to it in time. As the Irishman said, you can get used to anything, even to being hanged. But who of us ever forgets the cruel agony we feel when we first behold a beloved illusion lying stone dead before our eyes, murdered, most likely, by some brutal creature a year or so older than ourselves? All the philosophy in the world can't cure that sting. And how we hate the people who destroy our illusions. This is illogical, of course. We ought to be grateful to them. Oh, very. But human nature is always illogical. I have forgiven and forgotten a great many people, but I shall never forgive the girl who told me that there was no such person as Santa Claus, that it was just my father and mother who put the things in my stockings. I was 6 years old and she was 8. I thought she was grown up. I had admired and liked her before that. She was my pet idol among the quote-unquote big girls. After that, I hated her. I was afraid of her, too. She represented to me a person to be avoided because of the power she might possess of inflicting more pain. The next thing she would tell me might be that there are no fairies. Perhaps she wondered why I so suddenly gave over worshipping at her shrine. If ever the time arrives when I feel that I can really forgive that girl, I shall know that I have attained to a high level of Christian virtue. At our house, we are resting on our oars. what time we are not wrapping up and addressing Christmas presents. Our work is done. Everybody is remembered that we haven't forgotten, and we have tried to have as few misfits as possible. Theodosia undertook to pilot Ted through the mazes of his Christmas shopping. I did it last year with the integrity of my heart and the innocency of my hands. I'm wiser this year. When Ted asked me to go, I said I had a very pressing engagement, and wouldn't he ask Theodosia? Theodosia likes to be obliging, and besides, she didn't know, so she went off gaily enough, poor thing. That evening, after Polly and I had fanned her and given her hot drinks and rubbed her head with menthol, Theodosia recovered sufficiently to sit up and give us a detailed account, partly pantomimic, of her experiences Christmas shopping with Ted. She said I ought to have warned her, but I didn't see the necessity. It's such fun, after you've fallen into a trap yourself, to watch the next person being neatly nipped in it. So that is from Around the Table, signed Cynthia. Okay, so the first poem I'm going to read is entitled Winter Dusk in the Firs, and it's from 1905. Afar there is a fair white valley brimmed with reddening sunset, and the winds are free, piping upon the hills with silver-rimmed, fretting the air with frolic melody. Here, where the dusk is raining through the firs, only a murmur stirs. One star looks down through the tall oriel of sundered branches, and the ancient wood is falling upon rest in bosque and dell, lapping itself in purple quietude. But the fir boughs and tassels each to each still utter friendly speech. Dear is the twilight in this lonely glen, peopled with nun-like shadows, and my heart comes face to face with childhood's faith again, kept here in mystic guardianship apart. I walk with holy dreams, companion fair, by thoughts of prayer. And then the last poem is from 1919, is entitled Song of Winter. Fast tonight, the frost is holding over all the world we know. Fields we loved are grim and barren underneath the woven snow, and our forest, palled in purple, seems far less a friend than foe. But at twilight, we foregather by the red and purring flame, springtime long ago forsaken, summer but a golden name. By the hearth, as in the woodland, comradeship remains the same. Gone the gone the violet of the valley, gone the rose and daffodil. Song has left our hills of roaming, very lonely, very still. Secret glens have ceased to call us, and our river's voice is still. But our shabby books are with us, and our dreams are ne'er o'er. On the gloom of stark midwinter, we will shut our sturdy door. At our own fireside, the love light burns and beckons evermore.
At this particular time, I would like to thank all of our readers for today. Todd, Jane, Allison, and Ben, thank you for creating this wonderful event for us. I am so grateful that you agreed to do this for us. And thank you all for coming. Happy holidays to everyone. I hope you enjoyed today, and we'll hope to see you again soon.